The Nazi Roots of the Brussels EU. Chapter 3, read by Alan Taylor Shearer. The Greater Sphere Cartel, Das Großraum Cartel, and its organizational framework. Walter Hallstein was by no means the only architect of a post-World War II world under the control of the Nazi Cartel Coalition. By 1941, the Nazi regime was maintaining several official institutes with one purpose only: preparing the future economic and political shape of the world to be established after a Nazi cartel victory in World War II. One of these conquest institutes was the Central Research Institute for National Economic Order and Greater Sphere Economy in Dresden, Germany. The head of this official Nazi cartel planning office was Arno Salter. In 1941, Salter summarized the Nazi cartel plans for a post-World War II Europe under their control in his book The Greater Sphere Cartel, an Instrument of Industrial Market Order in a New Europe. Salter's book became a blueprint for the Brussels EU. The parallels are breathtaking. The Nazis' Greater Sphere Cartel Blueprint for the Structure and Function of the Brussels EU. Introduction. The German word Großraum, or Großer Raum, literally means greater space or greater sphere. By the summer of 1941, the coalition of the oil and drug cartel IG Farben, Bayer, BASF, Hoist, today part of the Sanofi Aventis, and their political military stakeholders, the Nazis, or National Socialist Party, had occupied France and brutally conquered large parts of Europe. It was at this time that the oil and drug cartel IG Farben began to reveal its post-war plans, after financing the rise of the Nazis and the build-up of their war machinery, which provided almost 100% of the explosives, gasoline, rubber, and the majority of other war essentials. The oil and drug cartel was looking for an exorbitant return on its investment. These facts are detailed in the 1945 U.S. congressional hearings on IG Farben and the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunals against it. The IG Farben cartel got the return on its investment that it was seeking. From the roughly 20 countries that were brutally conquered by the Nazi troops, IG Farben essentially received all of the chemical, pharmaceutical, petrochemical, mineral and other industries, mostly for free. Behind every tank that rolled into Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Norway and all the other European countries, there followed the men in grey suits, the corporate representatives of IG Farben, seeking to seize their booty. This unscrupulous plunder of entire industries and countries became the blueprint for subsequent global heists. Right up to the present day, Halliburton, various oil and drug multinationals, and other corporate investors in the Bush presidency made sure they got the return on their investments during the Iraq War. But back in World War II, the IG Farben terminology of a post-war rule over a greater sphere initially described the territory of Europe as including Russia. But this term was deliberately kept flexible so that with the projected military victories over Asia, America and the rest of the world, the term greater sphere would eventually comprise the entire globe. These plans for military world conquest and subsequent economic subjugation by the Nazi IG Farben coalition are detailed in the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunals against the directors of the IG Farben cartel. Copies of more than 40,000 original documents from this historical trial were hidden away from the public in the US National Archives for 6 decades. In 2007, they were finally published online at www.profit-over-life.org. The following detailed description of the IG Farben post-World War II plans was published in a 1941 book by Arno Salter entitled The Greater Sphere Cartel, an Instrument of Industrial Market Order in a New Europe. The publication of this book was not the act of an individual. Salter was head of the official Nazi Central Research Institute for National Economic Order and Greater Sphere Economy in Dresden, Germany at that time. This institute was one of the official economic planning officers of the Nazi Cartel Coalition for post-war Europe. This book provides the blueprint of what would later become the structure of the European Union, a body of cartel interests claiming greater spheres as their markets and operating beyond any democratic control. Excerpts from Salter's 1941 book. Chapter title, The Greater Sphere Cartel. We recall the market organization hierarchy, state, economic group, cartel, which we have established for the greater sphere. In this connection, we are disregarding the state's responsibilities in the field of commercial and currency policy within the greater sphere. Instead, we want to look in greater detail at the problem of the organization of the European market from a cartel point of view and, subsequently, look in detail at the problems of the economic policies of the state, which inevitably result due to the principal market regulation of the whole area of the Grossraum cartel. Directly in charge of the Grossraum cartel is the economic group, whose market regulating functions we want to see brought together in a cartel office. To this end, the existing cartel department for the economic groups would have to be expanded to take on the functions of this new office. Superior to the cartel office would be the Central Cartel Office, which on grounds of the remit assigned to it would correspond to the present Cartel Supervision Department of the German Industry Group, but also to the Cartel Department of Specialist Departments of the German Ministry for Economic Affairs. Today's EU Commission is an exact copy of this Central Cartel Office. It rules on behalf of cartel interests and beyond any democratic control. From a practical point of view, the tasks would have to be divided up in order to avoid the duplication of work. It would be expedient to assign the factual supervision of the cartel officers to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, whereas the duties of the Central Cartel Office for Industry would be more in dealing with questions of fundamental market organisation as well as legal and interstate cartel questions. In order to operate effectively, the Office for Industry would have to be kept informed about any problems arising. If we subsequently discuss the objectives of the Central Cartel Office, we shall also discuss the associated business and organisational problems, i.e., those not itemised according to the above-mentioned authorities. It naturally follows that the German method of cartel supervision will also be introduced in the non-German parts of the European sphere of influence. The extent and nature of the organisation in other countries would naturally vary depending on their degree of industrialisation. Below, we discuss the mode of operation of the organisation of the cartel in relation to the prevailing conditions in Germany. 1. The Central Cartel Office. A. The Central Cartel Office is the highest regulatory authority. Accordingly, it is responsible for taking final decisions on questions of areas of responsibility of the cartel supervision, responsible for maintaining close contact with the highest expert bodies, i.e., economic and trading policies, pricing policies, commodity policies, etc., and for coordinating with said expert bodies its subject-related decisions and fundamental instructions to subordinate institutions. B. The Central Cartel Office maintains contact with possible central national cartel officers of the other European countries, both in terms of dealing with important fundamental issues and concerning decisions about areas of responsibility that the Grossraum cartel or the individual national cartels cannot agree upon. C. Accordingly, the Central Cartel Office represents the appropriate complaint department regarding decisions taken by cartel officers. Furthermore, complaints concerning such matters as action taken and infringements committed by foreign cartels should be made via the Central Cartel Office. D. Cartel law, which is currently very diverse and poorly organised, would have to be reformed and as far as possible standardised for the entire greater sphere. More than 6 decades later, the EU Commission implements an almost exact copy of this plan with the goal of establishing standardised cartel law to rule over the lives of almost 500 million Europeans, without any democratic control. E. General market regulation principles for the European greater sphere would have to be drawn up. As regards to market and cartel regulation, similar rules have to be established, just like those economic decrees that are being worked out, or rather are still worked on, by the Ministry of Economic Affairs for the accounting system. A few decades later, and the Nazi IG Farben cartel decrees became EU directives, ruling not only over the health and lives of the people of Europe, but also draining their economies. F. In business economics, too, cooperation with non-German countries must be introduced in order to be able to prepare sound market regulation, including intercompany comparisons. G. A model organisational plan for a Großraum cartel would have to be drawn up along with clear, simple model of articles of association. To ensure effective cartel supervision, a suitably drafted cartel agreement is indispensable due to historical developments and often countless changes in contractual provisions. Many cartel agreements end up becoming completely impenetrable. Therefore, in future, a suitably formulated master agreement must be finalised which governs the details of any ongoing changes or supplementary agreements. This master agreement eventually became the EU's so-called Lisbon Treaty, an enabling law passed in 2009 that grants quasi-dictatorial powers to the cartel's EU Commission. For good reason, fearing that it would be rejected by the people of Europe, the cartel did not allow a democratic pan-European referendum on this master agreement. Notably, therefore, the people of the only country that voted on the treaty, Ireland, sent a resounding no to the Central Cartel Office, the EU Commission in Brussels, in June 2008. H. Suitable unified classification schemes must also be devised for cartel production and distribution statistics. The sales statistics must be laid out in such a way that at any time distribution can be adjusted according to consumption needs. I. A central cartel register must be set up, including not just German but also international participants in all areas of influence of the Großraum cartel. The cartel register must include both the nature of agreements reached and details of commodity procurement, business premises, production conditions, and the like. To a degree, the register must represent a mirror image of the Großraum cartel as a whole. J. The Central Cartel Office would have to arrange the publication of a journal entitled Das Großraum Cartel, the Greater Sphere Cartel, which would publish all decisions of the highest authority on all fundamental questions of European market regulation and directives and similar matters. This point, too, was also adapted by the Brussels EU, which issues the official journal of the European Union as its legal gazette. No regulation or directive can become law in the EU until it's been published in this gazette. Arno Salter's career as an architect of the Brussels EU. One could be forgiven for thinking that Arno Salter was one of the Nazi criminals who disappeared from the face of the earth at the end of the 1,000-Year Reich in 1945. Such a naive assumption would be very far from the truth, however. In reality, the services of this Nazi cartel architect of the subjugation of Europe to the interests of the cartel remained in high demand in the post-war years. In 1962, 5 years after the creation of the European Economic Community, Salter again made a name for himself as a cartel strategist within the EWG, European Economic Community. Under the title Exclusive Distribution Rights in a Common Market under Economic and EEC Cartel Legal Aspects, Salter published his old and new cartel concepts in issue 4, 1962, of the periodical Cartel Rundschau of the Karl Hyman's publishing house. In view of the seamless transitions from the Brussels strategies of the Third Reich to architects of the Brussels EU that we describe in this book, no one should ever be surprised by the quasi-dictatorial character of the Brussels EU. End of Chapter 3.